Have you ever felt someone pulling away from you, right when things started to feel real? Not slowly, not gently, but like a door quietly closing in your face. One day they feel close, warm, interested, and the next day they're distant, cold, hard to reach. You replay every conversation in your mind. Did I say too much? Did I push too hard? Did I scare them away? And the more you think about it, the more confusing it becomes. Because deep down, you felt something real. You felt the connection. You saw it in their eyes. You heard it in the way they spoke to you. You noticed the moments when they let their guard down. For a brief second, they were fully there with you. Then suddenly, they disappeared behind invisible walls. If you've ever been close to someone like this, you know the emotional storm it creates. Part of you wants to understand them. Another part of you feels rejected. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice asks a painful question. If they felt something too, why did they pull away? Most people respond to this situation the same way. They try harder. They send longer messages. They explain their feelings. They try to reassure the other person. They believe that if they just prove their love, prove their loyalty, prove their intentions, the avoidant will finally feel safe enough to stay. But something strange happens instead. The more effort you pour in, the more distance appears. The person you want closer seems to drift further away, and that can make you feel powerless, like no matter what you do, you're always one step behind their walls. But here's the truth, almost nobody tells you. Avoidant people are not running from you. They are running from the emotional intensity they feel when someone truly reaches them. And when that intensity rises, their nervous system reacts instantly, not with closeness, but with distance. It's not calculated. It's not always intentional. It's a defense mechanism built over years of emotional survival. For them, closeness can feel overwhelming, like standing too close to a fire that burns too bright. So they step back, not because the fire means nothing, but because they're afraid of getting consumed by it. This is where so many people misunderstand the situation. They interpret distance as rejection, but often, distance is actually a reaction to emotional impact. The truth is, avoidants rarely withdraw from people who feel meaningless to them. They withdraw from people who reach deeper than they expected. People who touch parts of them they spent years protecting. And when that happens, something complex begins inside their mind. One part of them feels drawn toward you. Another part feels the need to escape the vulnerability your presence creates. So they do what they've always done. They retreat. They create space. They silence their emotions long enough to regain control. But here's the part that changes everything. Even when avoidants step away physically, they don't always escape the emotional imprint someone leaves behind. Certain energies stay with them. Certain people linger in their thoughts, not because of constant messages, not because of pressure, but because of something much deeper, a presence that felt different, a connection that felt rare. And when you understand this hidden dynamic, the entire strategy changes. You stop trying to chase their attention. You stop exhausting yourself trying to prove your worth. Instead, you begin to understand how emotional impact really works, because the people who reach avoidance the deepest are not the ones who chase. They are the ones whose energy stays with them long after the moment has passed. And once you understand how that emotional imprint is created, something powerful begins to shift. And this is where most people make the mistake that quietly destroys everything. They feel the distance, the silence, the emotional shift, and panic takes over. Their mind starts racing with fear of losing the connection, fear of being forgotten, fear that someone else will take their place. So they reach out again. Another message, another explanation, another attempt to pull the avoidant back in. It feels logical in the moment. It feels like fighting for love. But to an avoidant nervous system, it feels like pressure closing in. And pressure is the one thing they are wired to escape. So the more someone tries to pull them closer, the more their instinct tells them to step further away. Not because they stopped caring, not because you meant nothing, but because emotional intensity begins to feel like a threat to their sense of control. This is why so many connections with avoidance end in confusion. One person keeps trying harder, the other keeps pulling further away. Both people feel something real, but they move in opposite directions. Yet there is another path almost no one talks about. A path that completely changes how avoidants experience your presence. Because what truly affects an avoidant is not emotional pressure, it's emotional gravity. Gravity doesn't chase. Gravity doesn't beg. Gravity simply exists, steady and undeniable. And over time, everything begins to move toward it. When you stop reacting from fear, something powerful begins to shift inside the dynamic. You stop trying to force closeness. You stop trying to control their emotions. You stop trying to convince them of your value. Instead, you return to your center. You become calm where others would panic. You become grounded where others would chase. And this changes the emotional atmosphere around you. Because avoidants are extremely sensitive to emotional energy. They notice when someone is trying to pull them, but they also notice when someone isn't. When you remain steady instead of reactive, you create space. And space is something avoidants secretly crave. Not endless distance, but the freedom to feel without being pushed. When that pressure disappears, their mind begins to process the connection differently. Instead of feeling trapped, they begin to feel curious. Instead of defending themselves, they begin observing you. Why aren't you reacting the way others did? Why does your energy feel calm instead of demanding? Why does your presence still linger in their mind, even when you're not chasing them? Curiosity is powerful. It slowly opens the emotional door they tried to shut. And once curiosity begins, something deeper starts to happen inside them. They start remembering you, not the conversations, not the arguments, but the way your presence felt, your calmness, your steadiness, your ability to exist without emotional chaos. Most people bring turbulence into an avoidance world. Pressure, drama, expectations, emotional storms. But when someone brings calm strength instead, it stands out in a way that is impossible to ignore. Because calm strength feels safe, and safety is the one experience avoidants rarely trust. So when they encounter it, something inside them pauses. They begin to compare. Other interactions start to feel heavier, more demanding, more exhausting. But you felt different. Your presence didn't try to control them. It didn't suffocate them. It simply existed. Quiet, confident, grounded. And that kind of energy does something powerful to the human mind. It becomes memorable. It leaves an imprint. Even when they try to focus on other things, the emotional contrast remains. They remember how peaceful it felt around you, how easy it was to breathe in your presence, how your energy didn't try to trap them. And slowly, without realizing it, the distance they created stops feeling like relief. Instead, it begins to feel like something is missing. Not dramatically, not all at once, but quietly. Like a room that suddenly feels empty, like a silence that feels unfamiliar. And when that realization starts forming inside them, the entire emotional direction begins to change. Because now the space they once used to escape you starts becoming the space where they begin to feel your absence. And that quiet feeling, that subtle sense that something is missing, is where the real shift begins. Because avoidants are used to distance. They know how to create it. They know how to live inside it. Distance has always been their shield. But when the person who once filled a space in their emotional world suddenly stops chasing, stops pushing, stops demanding, that shield begins to feel strangely heavy. The silence becomes louder. The absence becomes noticeable, not because you tried to prove your importance, but because your energy had already left an imprint that doesn't disappear just because someone steps away. And this is the moment most people ruin without realizing it. The moment when their anxiety takes over again. They feel the distance and panic. They convince themselves they need to remind the avoidant they exist. So they reach out again. They send another message. They try to reopen the door that was already beginning to move on its own. But real emotional impact doesn't come from forcing your presence back into someone's life. It comes from becoming someone whose absence speaks louder than their words ever could. This requires something most people struggle with: emotional discipline. The ability to hold your ground even when your heart feels restless. The ability to trust that your energy already did its work. Because the truth is, avoidants process emotions differently. They don't always feel things in the moment. Sometimes it takes distance for their mind to catch up to their heart. And when that happens, memories start resurfacing. Small moments, quiet conversations, the way you listened without trying to control them, the way your presence felt calm instead of demanding. Those memories begin to replay in their mind. Not loudly, not dramatically, but persistently, like a quiet echo they can't completely silence. And this is where the psychological pull becomes stronger, because the human mind always notices contrast. It compares experiences. It weighs emotional environments. When someone who brought calm stability disappears, everything else begins to feel different. Other interactions feel heavier, more chaotic, more exhausting. People who chase them start to feel overwhelming. People who demand attention start to feel draining. And slowly, almost without realizing it, their mind returns to the one presence that felt different. Your presence. Not because you forced it, but because it felt rare. And rarity has power. What is rare becomes valuable. What is valuable becomes unforgettable. This is why emotional self-control is so powerful. When you stop reacting from fear, you step into a completely different level of presence. You become someone who isn't defined by whether another person stays or leaves. Someone who knows their worth without needing constant validation. That kind of energy is deeply attractive to avoidants, because independence feels safe to them. It doesn't threaten their autonomy. It doesn't trap them. Instead, it creates a strange sense of respect. They begin to see you differently, not as someone chasing their approval, but as someone who exists confidently in their own emotional world. And respect is something avoidants rarely feel in relationships built on pressure. When respect appears, curiosity deepens, and curiosity slowly transforms into something stronger. Interest, not the forced kind, not the temporary kind, but the kind that grows quietly over time, the kind that makes someone wonder what you're doing, how you're living, whether you've moved on or whether your energy is still somewhere close to theirs. And once that curiosity begins growing inside them, something shifts in the emotional direction of the connection, because now they are the one thinking about you. Now they are the one remembering. Now they are the one feeling the space that once protected them. Except the space doesn't feel protective anymore. It feels empty. And when an avoidant begins to feel that emptiness, something powerful happens inside them. The distance they created stops feeling like freedom and starts feeling like loss. And when distance starts to feel like loss, something inside them begins to wake up. Not loudly, not dramatically, but slowly, like a quiet realization forming in the background of their mind. Because the human brain is wired to notice what disappears. It notices the energy that is no longer there, the warmth that once existed, the calm presence that used to make things feel easier. When that presence vanishes, the mind begins searching for it. And this is where the emotional gravity you created begins to pull. Avoidants are experts at suppressing feelings in the moment. They shut down. They distract themselves. They convince themselves that space is the right decision. But time has a strange way of exposing what suppression tried to hide. The silence becomes reflective. The distractions lose their power. And the mind starts replaying memories. Moments they once brushed aside suddenly feel different. The conversations, the laughter, the way you understood them without forcing them to explain themselves, the way you allowed them to breathe without demanding constant reassurance. That kind of emotional experience is rare. Most people don't know how to give it. Most people panic when distance appears. They chase harder. They cling tighter. But you chose something different. You chose stability over desperation. You chose dignity over chasing. And that choice quietly changes everything. Because now, instead of feeling pursued, the avoidant begins to feel something unfamiliar. Respect. Respect for the way you handled yourself. Respect for the calm strength you carried. Respect for the fact that your world did not collapse when they stepped away. That kind of emotional strength creates a powerful psychological shift. It transforms the way they see you. You are no longer someone trying to enter their life. You become someone they start wondering about, someone they start thinking about during quiet moments, someone whose absence begins to echo in unexpected ways. They might not admit it immediately. Avoidants rarely rush toward emotional vulnerability. They move slowly, cautiously. But curiosity has already started doing its work, and curiosity grows stronger in silence. The more they sit with their own thoughts, the clearer the emotional contrast becomes. They remember how peaceful your energy felt, how natural the connection was when things were simple, how safe it felt to exist around someone who wasn't trying to control them. Those memories begin to soften the walls they built, because walls are easier to maintain when someone keeps pushing against them. But when the pressure disappears, the walls begin to feel unnecessary. And slowly, something deeper begins to replace the fear they once felt. Interest. Not the anxious kind. The calm, reflective kind. The kind that makes someone pause and wonder if they misjudge the connection. The kind that makes them question whether stepping away was actually the right decision. That thought alone can change everything. Because once an avoidant begins questioning their distance, the direction of their emotions starts shifting. They begin leaning inward instead of outward, not rushing, not dramatically, but gradually, like someone stepping closer to something they once believed was dangerous. And the most powerful part of this entire transformation is that it didn't happen because you chased them. It happened because you stayed rooted in your own emotional power, because you understood something most people never realize. Real attraction is not created through pressure. It's created through presence, through the quiet confidence of someone who knows their value, someone who refuses to beg for connection, someone who understands that the right energy doesn't have to force its way into someone's life. It simply exists, strong, grounded, unshaken. And when someone carries that kind of energy, it becomes unforgettable. Even to someone who once ran from closeness, even to someone who built their entire identity around emotional distance. Because deep down, every human heart recognizes authenticity. It recognizes calm strength. It recognizes emotional safety. And when an avoidant finally feels that recognition rising inside them, something extraordinary happens. The person who once felt like a threat to their independence starts feeling like the one presence they can't easily replace. And once someone becomes emotionally irreplaceable, the story inside the avoidant begins to change. Because the human mind can ignore many things, but it struggles to ignore what felt rare, what felt peaceful, what felt real. At first, the realization is subtle, a quiet thought that appears when they least expect it, a memory that surfaces during ordinary moments. They might be busy, distracted, surrounded by noise, yet somehow your presence slips back into their mind. Not the dramatic parts, not the tension, but the calm, the ease, the feeling that things were lighter when you were around, and that realization slowly reshapes their perception of the connection. What once felt overwhelming now begins to feel meaningful. What once felt risky now begins to feel valuable, because distance has a strange way of revealing truth. When someone steps away from noise, they finally hear what their heart was trying to say all along. Avoidants often spend years believing that independence protects them, that distance keeps them safe, that emotional walls give them control. But when they encounter someone who didn't try to break those walls, someone who simply stood strong in their own energy, the entire pattern begins to shift. Because for the first time, closeness didn't feel like pressure. It felt like freedom. And freedom is the one thing avoidants guard with their entire identity. When they realize your presence never threatened that freedom, something powerful begins unfolding inside them. The fear that once pushed them away starts weakening. The walls they built begin to feel unnecessary, and curiosity transforms into desire. Not the desperate kind, not the impulsive kind, but a deeper pull, the kind that grows quietly but refuses to disappear. They begin wondering where you are, what you're doing, whether your calm energy still exists somewhere beyond their reach. And the more they think about it, the more they recognize something they didn't expect. They miss the way they felt around you, not just your words, not just your attention, but the emotional atmosphere you carried, the steadiness, the respect, the space you allowed them to breathe. That kind of experience becomes unforgettable because it's so rare. Most people try to hold on tightly when they fear losing someone. They cling, they chase, they demand reassurance. But you stepped into something much more powerful. You allowed your energy to speak louder than your fear. And that kind of strength leaves a permanent mark, because it shows something that words can never prove. It shows that your value does not depend on someone choosing you. Your worth is already established. Your presence is already complete. You didn't need their attention to define your peace. And when someone lives with that level of emotional clarity, their energy becomes magnetic. It draws attention without asking for it. It creates respect without demanding it. It leaves an impression that lingers long after the moment has passed, even inside the mind of someone who once believed they needed distance from everything emotional. Because deep down, avoidants are not searching for someone to trap them. They are searching for someone who feels safe enough to approach, someone whose presence doesn't threaten their independence, someone who stands strong without trying to control them. And when they encounter that kind of energy, something deep inside them begins to soften. The instinct to run becomes weaker, the curiosity to move closer becomes stronger, and slowly, almost unexpectedly, the connection begins to breathe again. Not through force, not through pressure, but through the quiet power of someone who chose self-respect over fear. Someone who understood that the most powerful thing you can become in another person's life is not the one who chased them, but the one whose presence they can still feel, even in the silence. And when someone begins to feel your presence even in silence, the dynamic has already changed, because now the power no longer lives in chasing. It lives in the energy you carry, the energy that refuses to collapse just because someone stepped back. This is the moment where most people either lose everything or transform the entire story, because once you understand what truly affects an avoidant heart, you stop playing the old game. You stop measuring your worth by their attention. You stop waiting for their messages to decide whether you feel secure. You stop shrinking yourself just to keep them comfortable. Instead, something stronger begins to grow inside you. Clarity. A deep understanding that attraction is not built through desperation. It is built through presence, through the quiet confidence of someone who knows they bring something rare. When you move through the world with that kind of emotional stability, people feel it, not just avoidance. Everyone. Your energy becomes grounded, steady, unshakable. And grounded energy creates something powerful. It creates safety. Safety is magnetic because most people live in emotional chaos. They react to every message, every silence, every small shift in attention. But when someone encounters a person who is calm in the middle of uncertainty, it disrupts their expectations. Avoidants especially notice this. They are used to people reacting to their distance. They expect frustration. They expect pressure. They expect emotional storms. But when those reactions never appear, their mind begins searching for an explanation. Why are you different? Why didn't you panic? Why didn't you chase? That mystery becomes powerful because humans are drawn to what they cannot easily predict. Predictability makes people comfortable, but mystery makes them curious. And curiosity slowly pulls attention back toward you, not because you demanded it, but because your energy stayed consistent. You remained the same grounded person, whether they moved closer or further away. That consistency builds respect, and respect is the foundation of emotional attraction that lasts. Without respect, interest fades quickly, but when respect exists, the connection becomes harder to ignore. Avoidants may still move slowly, they may still guard their vulnerability, but the emotional direction has already shifted. Instead of trying to escape your presence, they begin studying it, trying to understand it, trying to feel it again, because something inside them remembers how different it felt, how calm it felt, how safe it felt, and that memory grows stronger the longer your absence remains peaceful rather than desperate. This is why your greatest power is not convincing someone to choose you. Your greatest power is becoming someone whose energy speaks for itself, someone who carries self-respect so deeply that it becomes visible in every action, someone who does not chase validation because they already know their value. That kind of person becomes unforgettable, not because they demanded attention, but because their presence created something rare, a feeling of emotional stability in a world full of emotional noise. When someone experiences that kind of energy, they don't easily replace it. They remember it. They compare everything else to it. And slowly, that comparison begins guiding them back toward the source of that feeling, toward the person who never tried to control them, the person who allowed space without losing themselves, the person who remained calm even when uncertainty appeared. That is the kind of presence that reaches deeper than words ever could, the kind that lingers inside someone's mind long after the moment has passed. Because in the end, the strongest emotional connections are not built through force. They are built through authenticity, through the quiet strength of someone who refuses to abandon their own peace. And when you become that person, something extraordinary happens. You stop trying to make someone feel your worth. They begin feeling it on their own. And once that realization begins forming inside them, the walls they built for protection no longer feel necessary. They begin leaning closer to the very energy they once tried to escape, not because you chase them, but because your presence reached somewhere deeper than fear, somewhere deeper than their defenses, a place inside them that recognizes something rare, something real, something their soul does not want to lose.